Hello, and welcome to our Vibe Tribe podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kacie.
And I'm Jana.
This is a podcast where we seek to bring together people from near and far, from all walks of life, with different viewpoints and ideals. And we welcome you into our Vibe Tribe. Hello there, Vibe Tribe. Welcome back. We're here with another exciting episode where we're going to be actually having another interview. So we're really excited today. Jana, do you want to introduce, since you're the co-author of we're exploring more of the Rites and Rituals, Harnessing the Power of Sacred Ceremony book, and we're exploring a different chapter. And Jana, would you like to introduce?
Sure. Reverend Asherah Allen is the author of chapter 12, talking about conscious parenting. She has a wide variety in her background, from acupuncture to massage therapist. And she's going to talk to us more today about conscious parenting and what that looks like with her daughter and the different rituals that she's done. Welcome, Asherah.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a delight to be here with you both and to speak about this topic that I'm very passionate of.
We're really excited to have you. I read your chapter. I reread it again today because I got this book months ago and read it, and really moved me and brought me to tears, actually. I found myself getting choked up with a lot of what you were speaking about. And, you kind of laid the groundwork in, finding community. So I guess my first question for you is, with conscious parenting, you talk about, it kind of takes a village. So how did you find your community? How would you recommend others find community?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, parenting. We always hear that sort of quip phrase, it takes a village. The problem is, where's the village? And I think particularly for those parents who, my heart to yours, were parenting, especially with small children during the height of the pandemic and the isolation that ensued, though I'm sure there were virtual gatherings, it's not the same. And so, back when, way back when we all were tribal in some fashion, we would wet nurse each other's children. Right? Somebody's baby walked up to you, you had a wet boob, you helped them out. And we had this sense that we all belonged to each other and that everyone's children were, in a sense, our children, and that we belonged to each other. But even more than that we belonged to the earth and the earth belonged to us. And so as a pagan, as a witch, for me, that's really core and central to my parenting. And I didn't have a lot of examples growing up, certainly, other than my own gnosis and relationship with nature to pull from as a source of nurturing. And so that's, I guess, where my first community was with nature. And for those of us who had parents, as I did, who suffered from mental illness, we may have been parentified at a young age. We may have found that we had a mother wound, a place where maybe that sense of nourishment wasn't always available, or maybe not as healthy as we would have liked for it to be at times. And I always like to have a caveat there that I love my mother dearly, and I truly believe she did the best that she could with a very difficult diagnosis. That being said, I had mother hunger, at times when she wasn't available. So I found that mother hunger actually extended out even to my sense of the divine, that I did not relate to this idea of a man in the sky who was separate from me, that I could talk to and he may or may not reply. And my sense of the divine was always very much from the feminine. And I'm not really talking genders here as much as I'm talking energy. The feminine energy, even we know scientifically that we all start as females in the womb, right? And then we get that chromosomal split if we're perhaps going to be assigned male at birth. Okay, so suffice it to say, it all starts with the mother. but the ultimate mother is the earth. And so if we're disconnected from that, we're actually disconnected from our ultimate source of motherhood, period. So throughout most traditions, most tribal nations, we hear the earth referred to as the feminine. You know, the Gaia and the earth mother, Pachamama. So for me, stepping into motherhood, I found I needed to step beyond not only my own experience, which had been harrowing, beautiful at times, but harrowing, into I need a healthy example, and I know I can't do this alone. And so while it wasn't my intention at the time, my ex-husband had attended a festival held by the Earth Spirit community called Rites of Spring. And he came back and was just lit up like a firecracker and was very passionate about it. And I couldn't wait to go the following year. And I did. And I fell right into it as well. Really loved the people there. I found them to be a very family-centered and welcoming community. And they really were a community. They were gathering at certain points during the year. But beyond that, they had history. It's the oldest pagan gathering in the history of the United States. And I think it's on its 45th year this year. So
Right.
yeah, it's a lot. It's pretty old for the US. And, you know, I've known it to have maybe up to 600 people there. You know, COVID numbers can be waning, but people who had history, people who had a lot of heart connections that spanned decades. And I noticed this community's capacity to hold people even when relationships broke up. I noticed how they held children and how they centered family and the awareness of children, even though there are certainly adult things at the gathering, which I hadn't always experienced at other festivals that were definitely more adult centered. So I found that I was searching for rituals and ceremony that would speak to who I was and who I wanted my daughter to feel held by. And I found that the Earth Spirit community was a tremendous wealth of giving and generosity and knowledge and wisdom and tradition in that regard.
When is that held?
So Rites of Spring is held in late May, almost every year, I think every year. And they have different gatherings throughout the year. They have open circles in both Boston and Western Mass. And so at earthspirit.org, people can look on their calendar if you're interested to come to any of those gatherings. And at times they are offered online since COVID.
That's really nice that it's open to everyone. Eventually, is that something that you have to get initiated into?
I don't know. So this is not a a spiritual lineage. It's a community, and there are people from all different and sundry paths that come to the gathering. Most people there, I would venture to guess, identify as pagan, but we've had people of many different faiths show up over the years, and all are really welcome. And for those of you who might need the definition of the term paganism, my loose understanding in terms of how we regard it today is people of the country, but really people who venerate the earth as sacred. So this earth-based spirituality is a really beautiful common denominator, especially for all of us who are living during these times of climate apocalypse.
Yes.
You know, if we start really regarding the earth as sacred, and we start understanding that we are not separate from the earth, that we are the earth, then we're much less likely to cause the earth harm, knowing that if we do that, we're harming ourselves. But that schism is still very much present because of dominionism. You know, we're given power over the natural world in accordance with some faiths. And I don't like to knock other people's faiths. I am going to point to things that I don't view as healthy. I'm a healer. That's what I do. And I don't think it's healthy for us to consider ourselves separate from something that we actually are. So as an acupuncturist, right now it's raining outside, we would say, oh, it's a damp day. That dampness is inside of us because we're part of the earth. And I see that all the time. Patients will have more mucus or, you know, evidence of what we call dampness in Chinese medicine.
Achy joints.
Yeah,
For me,
achy
it's like, oh, I want to curl up.
Right. Right, because that dampness is in us, right? So, so the Earth Spirit community, when it came time to baptize, for example, I knew I didn't want to baptize my daughter but I knew I wanted to have some sort of ritual. And in the Earth Spirit community, there's a custom, not so much in the community, but of, I would say, the Arthans and their tradition, which comes from Scotland. And there's something called seining. So in the Celtic Isles, this is a way that a child is basically introduced to the elements, earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. And it's a gathering and a ceremony where the child is introduced to those elements. So my daughter had, I picked someone for each of those directions, very important people in her life, and they were sort of given their script. And they would introduce her to water. So her meeting the element of water for the first time, or the element of air with a feather and some incense, or the element of fire having a candle kind of danced in front of her eyes, or the earth, the smallest dot of earth you can imagine being placed on her tongue and being lifted up to spirit that she may come to understand herself as part of the divine. So it's basically like a baptism through all of the elements, not just the element of water. So that was the first real ceremony that I would say that she was a part of.
That's absolutely beautiful.
It is lovely.
Yeah, it's I feel really grateful to Andres and Deirdre Arthan, who started the Earth Spirit community and are the head leaders of the Earth Spirit community, and for sharing their wisdom for people like me who maybe were looking outside dominant culture paradigms for how to raise my child and have a sense of rhythm and honoring of big phases in her life.
Well, I love how through doing that, you're teaching her to respect the earth as she respects herself, as we are earth and we are one with the earth. And I love how you're giving her the tools necessary to take on what's so daunting and scary right now, the climate change, global warming, all these issues that we're facing, by conscious parenting. You're raising a conscientious child that's going to go into the world and enact change in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, she's devoted to studying marine ecology, and that's her passion.
Cool.
So she's narrowing in on some really great research universities right now. So do I think she would have come to that path with or without the influence of the community? Who's to know, right? But to what I do know is it played a pretty pivotal role in shaping who she is and her sense of love for nature, but also her sense of devotion.
And I love also how you you were speaking earlier about, mother wound. And I love how you were talking about through conscious parenting and giving to your child a perspective that you didn't have, and an acceptance and a connection. You were also speaking to healing past intergenerational traumas too.
Yeah,
I love
for
your book,
sure.
how you were talking about healing like trauma that your mother had endured. And it all comes down to understanding that our parents are human.
Yep.
And we're all just in this human condition, in this human state, and we all come with our baggage and everything. But I love how you talk about this intergenerational kind of healing.
Yeah,
It's so important to healing the world.
it is important to healing the world. There's the saying, healer, heal thyself, for that reason, because microcosm, macrocosm, right? And if we haven't worked on our own stuff, it's going to come out when we parent. And so part of conscious parenting is, if you have the privilege, really taking the time to do your part and doing what you can to heal your childhood wounds before you find yourself in the role of parent. Now, we all know healing is a journey, and it's never just tied up the end with a neat little bow. Work is done. We know that it's an ongoing process. However, if we've done some work with healers, with psychologists, with shamans, whoever we need to work the spiritual, mental, physical, emotional components of our own childhood wounds, of which we all got some. Some of us have little t trauma, some of us have big T trauma, but we all got trauma. And so working on that will help us be better parents. So that's another way to be conscious as a parent. If we haven't done that inner work, it will come up in our parenting. It'll come up in our adult relationships as well.
Can you
So,
talk about like an example of how one could heal themselves?
Sure. Without knowing exactly
Like
what they
their
want
inner
to
child,
feel.
like their inner child, you know, like you said an
Yeah.
example in the book.
Yeah. So you can get a photo of yourself as you were as a child. And part of this is inspired by one of my spiritual teachers, Karina B. Hart, and of the crone herself. Check her out. She's amazing.
Oh,
And she, had a ritual that she had offered that I spun off of a little bit in terms of just making it accessible to others. But we can start with a photo of ourselves as a child and just place that on what I would call an altar, but any open surface, and sit in front of it for a bit and really think about that child and what did that child need? What was their core wound? What were they not getting that they needed? What was their overriding sort of story that they might have been telling themselves about themselves that may not have necessarily been true, but was being reflected to them? And then we can write on sort of an opposite piece of paper if we want what we'd rather believe, what we'd rather have that child know about themselves. And we start to kind of look at that part and realize that part is still in us. So for those of us who've done internal family systems, which is a form of psychotherapy, we can start to identify our different parts. And just because, I'm now 48, doesn't mean that I'm not also all the ages I've ever been leading up to that. I still carry all of those parts with me at all times. And for those of us who are parents, you'll know what I mean when you look at, let's say, my 17-year-old, but every time I look at her, I'm still seeing the little baby, the toddler, the preteen, the teen, right? Mm-hmm. And for some of us, we're even holding the vision of who we think our child is becoming or what our hopes and dreams for them, right? So we're all of those things all at once. And when we're holding that higher vision for our children, we're giving them that place to step into that maybe they can't see. But for ourselves, we need to be doing that as well, right? So when we've done that healing work on our inner child, we don't come to our children trying to heal our stuff through them, to live vicariously. And it's okay to a point, right? I gave my daughter in many regards the childhood I wished I had had. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But we want to be able to relate to them authentically as for who they really are, not just projecting all our stuff on them, right?
Amen to that.
Yeah. And it's hard, right? Like parenting's, as we know, probably the hardest job in the world.
Definitely.
Definitely the most rewarding, but equally the hardest, right?
Yeah.
And my friend Chris Ciccarello said probably my most favorite quote of parenting ever, which is that parenting is a constant cherishing and a constant letting go.
Oh, wow.
Very well put.
Right? It's so perfect. And I guess, for me, when I did that inner child work and really tuned into her, I was able to give my inner child what she needed that she never got. And I think it was probably a meme somewhere, so forgive me, but for not recalling it exactly. But I remember I was so touched when I first saw it, and it said something to the tune of, if we had known that it would be ourselves that would come to rescue us as the child, we may not have turned to XYZ ABC, right? Like when we were praying as little children, like, come save me, or I want out of this, or whoever it was that we prayed to or prayed for to just come save me, it was us that we were praying to, our future self that goes back and heals the inner child. So I hope I didn't lose anyone there.
No, but that's really a beautiful image to think about. And I also think of different kinds of meditation that you can do where you're focusing on your inner child, or you're trying to help your past self through a traumatic experience. So
Right.
the imagery of that is just beautiful.
Yeah. And we can have play dates with our inner child. Like if you were like me and you were relatively parentified, maybe you felt like you were kind of robbed of your childhood in some aspects, maybe not all, but enough that you kind of don't always feel like you got a childhood. then you get to do that now. Like nobody's stopping you from breaking out your Crayolas and your finger paints or mashing your food, eating with your hands. No one's stopping you from going on the playground and swinging and tossing some balls around and hula hooping or, whatever it is, staying up all
Sky's
night.
the limit.
Yeah, having a blanket, party with your flashlight and a book until whenever, making your little blanket fortress. Like, what does your inner child want?
Well, and maybe that's the toddler stage, because I know my little girl is almost 2, and I look at all of the different ways that we play, and I'm like, how much of that did I do when I was 2? I obviously don't remember, but I feel like I'm also feeding that within myself right now.
And I wanted on that note to kind of say to all the parents who, like me, maybe found it really challenging to play with their child because they don't remember playing much or knowing how. It's okay. It's okay. Just let your child lead, and don't be afraid. Again, back to community, that's the glory of being in community, is that other people might be able to fulfill roles that you can't and or don't want to, and letting yourself have your limitations and not trying to be all do all. And I think about that trend of like helicopter parenting, which I never related to and certainly didn't want to be. And yet I have sympathy for it because, again, tribally, if we had, 50, 100 eyeballs on our child, the helicopter parent is clearly feeling like it's up to them to, not just control their child, but like it's up to me and only me. And if we could relax a little bit, knowing like everyone's got my back, everyone's got my child's back. Right.
Well, helicopter parenting also stems from trauma, like, that they weren't taken care of and they weren't watched over, and they feel like, okay, I have to be there for my child in a way that someone wasn't there for me, or other people, the community wasn't looking out for me when I was being abused by my parent, and they weren't saving me, so when you have your own, I feel for those people because I was a child of a helicopter parent, and I love her for it because, I'm always been safe, but like that also can stem from trauma, not so much, the need to control or to be everything, just trauma, that's like a trauma response for some people. So
that's a really good reminder. And I think a lot of times how we're behaving is a trauma response, right? So how important for us to be conscious and aware, right? Like there's so much in our vernacular now, and I feel like we're really becoming more conscious every day as people in general. I feel like a lot of people are waking up right now, just in general, that our consciousness levels are increasing because they have to if we're going to make it out of this conundrum. And as we're waking up, we need new rituals sometimes because the old ones aren't quite fitting. And I think that it's sad for people to deprave themselves of spirituality or connection just simply because what was isn't working anymore. So finding communities that have tradition, but are also building upon those traditions and keeping things new and fresh is really important. So I know, Earth Spirit Community also has a podcast, Earth Spirit Voices. And that's where they try to give sort of the face to different key players in the community and for people to get a sense of both the new and the old and keep it fresh. So in terms of helping people find your local community, I think you need to define what your core values and ethics are. Are you looking for a community centered around your faith? Are you looking for a community centered around your philosophies? What are you looking for? And I think once that you'll find them.
Also, sorry to interrupt, but for those of us who have a lifestyle where we're moving a lot with work or life changes, whatever that might be, it's hard to continually try to find that community no matter where you are.
Right. I give patients a resource, meetup.com. But honestly, it's freaking amazing because you can think of anything under the sun, any interest that you have, plug it in, And boom, there's either already a group that meets around that shared interest, or if there isn't, you can create one in less than 10 minutes and bam, you've got like 15, 20 people who all want to do the same thing. So if you are somebody who's like, nah, I got to actually build my community because who I am and those people, they're not, it's like not here yet. Then do it. Start on meetup.com and go. And I would say, don't be afraid to approach community leaders in other states or places and say, how'd you do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I love that advice.
that's beautiful.
Yeah, if you don't have it, build it. Don't stop there. Don't give up. You know?
Well, I've recently been trying to do that myself. Well, actually, Jan and I have been working to do that.
Yeah, it's sort of that if you build it, they will come thing, but it's true. It really is. So I have had that experience in my own life, starting different things and initiatives and projects. And sometimes if we're holding that vision again, we're creating that space for people to step into, and people will get magnetized, naturally.
I love that. Well,
Speaking of parenting, I'm in the middle of it right now, doing it all by myself.
Yeah, I saw her head peek up a little bit. I was like, oh, there's our girl.
Yeah. I think that's perfect for this podcast.
Well, we're very like, this is where we're at. We're very honest with our listeners. We're like, oh, today's, Solara's going to be we're going to be interviewing Solara a lot today and talking to her.
That's good. And I mean, I wish I was remembering her name, but there was a representative at the UN, and she was nursing right there in the middle of everything, had her mic on her desk, and she's full on nursing. And of course she made newspapers because it was all the news because she was doing this. But I thought, can we normalize parenting, not just nursing, which is super important to normalize. But, recently I have two friends, and a male and a male, two dads, and they pointed out something which I didn't know, given who I am, would be their experience. So I live in the Pioneer Valley. It's considered a pretty liberal place overall. And there were no places for them in any of the male bathrooms to change their kiddos' diapers. So they would be in restaurants where the moms had diaper changing stations every single time, if they had them at all. The mothers would, but fathers, oh no. And here you have two dads and nowhere to change a diaper. So I think we got some growth to do at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
First of all, whatever with gendered bathrooms in the first place, but diaper changing stations, right? Like, this is part of being conscious parents, though, is that bring this into your workplace. Okay. If you're going to be a conscious parent, it shouldn't be just for your benefit or your children's benefit or even your community's benefit. Like, you can always be an advocate out there in the world. So you can point out to restaurants, hey, you don't have a diaper changing station. Would you like me to do this at the table in front of your guests? Kids are a thing, and I think conscious parenting is, being an advocate for parents everywhere and for children everywhere that we go.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. So I was going to say also for men too, we need to normalize parenting with men, because I remember that video of during the pandemic, that guy was going through it, and like he was being interviewed on the news, and the kids came barreling in, and the mom's chasing them, trying to duck down and grab them and stuff. It was the cutest moment ever. I was like, oh, but like, even for men,
Well, for transgender people, for non-binary people, like we're in 2023, right? Like, we need to be making spaces for everybody already and get over ourselves, because everyone's here, nobody's going anywhere, and we're only becoming more of who we are. So like, it's really time to get over ourselves and just include everybody and understand that parents come in all shapes and sizes, all genders, all gender identities, all sexual orientations that you can imagine. And until we just swallow that hook, line, and sinker and understand that, then it's not that it's something to swallow. It's just a truth, right? It is. And people are, and nobody is, incapable of being a parent. Nobody. So we all get to be whatever we want, and irrespective of gender. And we need everyone kind of getting over their biases already and just creating free and open spaces for parents, because we encounter a lot of biases, even if we are heteronormative or we're a typical mom or whatever. Still there isn't space for us as parents in many environments, or we still get hairy eyeballs if we are nursing in public, right?
That's
And
ridiculous.
so if we're going to encourage conscious parenting out there in the world, we got to start advocating for open spaces for children and parents of all forms and shapes and sizes.
I'll
Right?
never forget one of my baby shower gifts. A friend of mine made a hat for Solara that was actually looked like a boob. It had a nipple. It as if she was wearing it while nursing. It was like my boob was hanging out. It was hilarious. We got the best laugh out of it. And how interesting is it that, we're still facing that in 2023,
Yes.
that a woman is the one who's supposed to be changing all the diapers.
Right. Or, how do I say, like that, that somehow nursing is, I don't know, something that would be crude, or anything that would need
It's
to be
sexualized.
or
They
sexualized, which is really more a commentary on the person finding an issue with it. Right. But if we aren't speaking up when we see that kind of thing going down, then we're kind of we are part of the problem. Right. So I guess part of my call to conscious parenting is to be an advocate, speak out and make changes right where you stand. And so that it's easy for people to be out there in the world, because it's hard being a parent. It's hard enough. So we need spaces that are available and open for everybody. And, I don't know about you, but how many times have we heard like, oh, I don't like children? And that always is fascinating to me, because we were all children at one point. So that's a really sad thing to say, because it basically means you don't like you, because you were
exactly.
you still are a kid. So it doesn't mean you got to relish hanging around kids or like want to party with them or do daycare, but really, you don't like children. So I think I pause whenever I hear something like that and just kind of reflect it back to somebody, that kind of challenging, because this is how we, when we have that kind of generalized attitude of, oh, a kid is crying in a restaurant and everybody hairy eyeballs the parent. I don't know about you, but I'm like, oh man, I remember those days. And I just go on eating, right? Like, even if I am out to a romantic dinner or whatever, I'm still, if somebody brought their kid, like, look, are we going to ban children from everywhere? I don't know. Certainly we have spaces that are free and open for adults, right? And I think we need more open spaces, for children. I know there was a local cafe in town that's no longer around, but it was incredible. They just had such a dedicated space for children, and they were just crawling with kids all the time, because parents were like, oh my gosh, I can bring my kid here and I can work, and my child's so welcome. So again, I think really look at your work environment, people. Look at all your environments and how can we just include the kids?
Yeah, the kid that's growling no less.
The kid that's having a tantrum, like, instead of giving a hairy eyeball, like, do you want to step over and like, I'm the woman on the plane who's like, I will hold your baby and pace up and down the aisle, and like, you can pretend to sleep for a minute, right?
I've done that before, and then I get people who look at me like, are you crazy? Like, it's hard, because a lot of people judge your your sincerity, like want to help them. Like, I've encountered that too with mother shopping. The child's having a meltdown,
Right.
and and it's like, I can't help you, and then they're like, they give you this look.
Well, we're taught in this day and age to also really mistrust one another. And I don't know that that's entirely wrong, but by the same token, what if we all remembered we belong to each other, and we could just take a good-hearted person up on a genuine offer like that?
It would be so amazing.
It would be so amazing. In other parts of the world, like in the EU, mothers are given a doula on the house for a year. Fathers are given equal paternity leave to the maternity leave. And there are other countries and places that really invest in their families early on.
Asia does that too. I watched a fertility journey of a woman who was having trouble getting pregnant, and eventually she gets pregnant, and by this time she's in China. Her husband was brought there for work and everything, and they had someone stay with her for a solid month, like getting her ready to have the baby, and then after the baby, and feeding her the right kind of foods to balance out her body, hormonally, helping her in the bath, giving her showers, helping with the baby. It was amazing, like all of what the resources they have available to help.
Yeah, it's part of the reason I think I got into doula care and post doula care was for that reason. I felt like somebody needs to be focused on the mama, not just the baby, and during the birth experience, but afterward as well. So, again, you can activate yourself. You don't have to go become a full-fledged doula, but how can you help out? When there's a new mom, I promise you, they are not going to complain if meals show up that can go in the freezer. Nobody's going to turn you away, I hope, if you offer to come hold the baby while they go to the bathroom all by themselves or take a shower. Those things that new moms, you're like, my 2 hands, can I just have my 2 hands for me for like 5 minutes? Like what can we do to support new families and single parents as well, are often just forgotten about or left in the lurch. So how do we really support each other and realize that not everybody's operating from the same point of privilege when it comes to parenting and resources? Right. So yeah, in terms of rituals too, in the book, I speak about my daughter's first moon blood, the first time that she had her period, and sort of that ritual as well. If we look at rituals in our culture that overall we're just lacking, that would be one. There's also a coming of age ritual when, a child is really no longer a child and is really stepping into their adulthood. Right. So that's another ritual that I speak of, her coming of age ritual. And so, when you read the chapter 12 it is in Rites and Rituals, I'll hold it up, that I think you'll get some ideas of what you could do in your own faith. And again, I've spoken for my own faith, but please don't think that that's exclusionary. Again, I think all faiths are beautiful and at their core and deserve to have their own, rituals. But some communities just have very established the benefit of established rituals, whereas other communities don't. So sometimes we got to invent it for ourselves, or on the spur of the moment. So I hope that people can identify where in your life maybe you didn't get rituals that you wanted. Maybe you never had a coming of age ritual and it's kind of too late for that in some regards, but maybe it looks like spending all night somewhere by yourself, but having people who are orchestrating that and looking out for you, and maybe your first blood was never recognized, but do you want a crone ceremony for when you go into menopause and you're no longer bleeding? What rituals can you do for yourself that you never got, and how can you sacralize your everyday life? It's a good question to ask yourself, and then be brave enough to ask your friends and community to support you.
One last question for you. What was your most recent ritual that you've done for yourself?
I'm trying to think. Let's see. I would actually, the first thing that comes to mind is my ritual of a family gathering every year. My immediate family only sees each other twice a year. And so, creating the space and that time to gather together is a ritual of sorts. And we have like the same activities that we do. And in that summer ritual that we do, we have one around the holidays in December, but this summer ritual, we have a graveyard picnic with our father. And that actually is for me. And just as much as it is, I think, perhaps for the benefit of his soul as well. But we just lay out and have a little picnic with my dad. And I cherish that time every year, and remembering the ancestors and just seeing the younger generations. We had 2 in our family who are about to go into college. And so I imagined what the fathers, as I'm sitting there next to my dad, my grandfather, my great grandfather, and what's the advice that they would give the children now? So that's definitely something I did for myself, but for them too.
That's
Yeah.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. Well, Asherah, thank you for the time once again that you spent with us. And Vibe Tribe, we hope you enjoy this episode. And please click on the link, check out the book. It is an incredibly inspirational book that has many stories of ways that you can incorporate rites and rituals into your life. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. We are enjoying our time with you, and thank you for being part of our Vibe Tribe. If you have any suggestions for future podcasts, you can find our email address in the description. And also keep your eyes open on social media for us and give us a follow. Thanks again.